I didn't grow up with bedtime stories. I grew up with exit routes. Mara used to say lullabies were for children who believed the world would stay polite after dark. In our apartment above the pawn shop, politeness was a rumor. So instead of a teddy bear, I slept with a slim steel punch tool tucked inside my pillowcase. And instead of counting sheep, I counted doors. Front, back, fire escape, stairwell. It was the only way my ribs stopped trying to crawl out of my chest. Mara wasn't my mother. She never pretended to be, but she fed me, taught me to read contracts, and paid my school fees with money she earned guarding other people's secrets. She also gave me the first rule I still follow. If someone offers you love the way they offer you a deal, read the fine print twice. My legal name was Saren Vale, but in the neighborhood everyone called me Kid, as if keeping my age vague made me safer. On the day I turned 17, Mara handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a dog tag on a chain blank on one side, engraved on the other with coordinates, and a single word, return. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Before you ask, Mara said, voice flat, I didn't steal you. I found you. She poured tea like we were discussing weather. You were left on a clinic step in a storm, with a ribbon on your wrist, and a name that wasn't mine. I kept you alive. That was the job. The rest became us. I wanted to demand more, but Mara's face had a new tension, like she had been holding a door closed with her spine. Someone has been looking, she added. They found us through an old record. They're coming today. You can refuse. But if you refuse, you need to be ready to run forever. The people who came did not look like kidnappers. That's what frightened me. They arrived in a quiet electric sedan and wore clothes that smelled faintly of expensive detergent. The woman introduced herself as Alina Hart, family counsel for the Larkwell Group. The name meant little to me until she showed me the newsfeed on her tablet. Larkwell Green Dom's opening next month a solution for coastal floods. The Larkwells were the kind of family whose last name turned into buildings. Alina's smile was polite in a way that felt rehearsed. Saren Vale, she said. We have DNA confirmation. Your birth name is Saren Larkwell. My stomach flipped as if she'd announced I had an extra organ. Mara leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, State your purpose. Alina's gaze didn't waver. To bring Miss Larkwell home, she said. There is a trust, a guardianship correction, and... She hesitated, as if the next word was fragile. An apology. Apologies are cheap, Mara's voice whispered in my memory. Repair is not. I looked at the dog tag in my palm. Return. The coordinates were in Harbour City, across the bay, where the skyline glittered like a knife. I asked the only question that mattered. Do I have a choice? Alina nodded. You always did, she said. That was probably true. It just hadn't been offered to me until now. I said yes because I wanted to see what kind of people could lose a child and still sleep. I packed one backpack. Documents, Mara's spare phone, a small toolkit, and the steel punch tool from my pillowcase. When Alina's driver opened the car door, Mara didn't hug me. She pressed her palm to the back of my head for a second, heavy, steady, and said, Don't let them rewrite your history into a fairy tale. Fairy tales are how predators clean their teeth. Then she stepped back, expression unreadable, and I left with a chain on my neck and a hunger in my chest that didn't know whether it was anger or curiosity. The Larkwell estate was a glass house on a hill, all light and reflective surfaces, designed to make everything look clean. Inside smelled like citrus and money. People in quiet uniforms moved like shadows. When I walked into the main atrium, a chandelier shaped like a bloom hung above a marble floor that could have fed my neighborhood for a year. At the center of the space stood a woman with hair pinned, like she was going to a gala instead of meeting a daughter. Her eyes were wet, and the tears looked professionally applied. Saren, she said, and held out her hands. I'm Elowen, your mother. Behind her, a man with gray at his temples watched me with the careful gaze of someone assessing risk. I'm Julian Larkwell, he said. Your father. They didn't move toward me. They waited for me to decide whether they deserved distance. That was their first mistake. Distance is not a gift I give. It's a default I start with. On a velvet sofa nearby sat another girl about my age, smaller than me, curled around a plush rabbit so worn its fur had turned to velvet. She rose when she saw me, nervous and earnest. Hi, she said. I'm May. Her voice trembled. I'm the girl who's been living here. Elowen's hand fluttered toward May as if to reassure her, then froze, as if touching May in front of me might look like betrayal. The air thickened with unspoken scripts. I had read enough novels in the library to know the usual version. The returned heir is expected to be grateful and quiet. The adopted one is expected to be pitied and protected, and the parents are expected to panic about their image. I waited for the line that would set the chessboard. Julian cleared his throat. "We want you to know," he said carefully, "that what happened was our failure, and we will make it right." Elowen whispered, "We've missed you every day." May hugged her rabbit tighter, eyes shiny, and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." No one had shouted. No one had demanded I smile. That, for reasons I couldn't name yet, made my skin prickle more than hostility would have. Then Julian did something that snapped the scene into focus. He gestured toward a folder on the table. "This is a transfer document," he said. 51% voting shares of Larkwell Domes, effective immediately, held in trust until your 18th birthday, but managed with your consent starting today. I blinked. This was not a welcome. It was a shield, a way to prove, on paper, that the real child mattered, so the world would stop asking whether they were monsters. It was also an offer with a leash attached. If I accepted, I was tied to their company, their image, their enemies. If I refused, I looked ungrateful and would be easier to erase. I opened the folder, scanned the clauses, and said, "I'll review it with my own counsel." Julian's jaw tightened. Elowen's smile wavered. Alina Hart, standing quietly in the corner, watched me with something like relief. May's eyes widened, as if she had never seen someone say no in this house. I realized then that May and I were both being used as symbols, one of loss, one of guilt, but May didn't know it yet. They gave me a room on the east wing, larger than my entire apartment with Mara. It had a bed made like an apology and a view over the bay. On the night I arrived, I couldn't sleep. My body kept waiting for footsteps that weren't there, for shouting, for the crackle of danger. I shoved the steel tool under my pillow out of habit and stared at the ceiling until my eyes hurt. Around midnight, someone knocked softly. I didn't answer. The knob turned anyway, slow, cautious. I rolled to the side, hand closing around steel, heart steady in the way it only gets when I'm preparing for impact. A small figure slipped in. May. She tiptoed like she was entering a chapel and hugged her rabbit to her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you probably hate me." The word hate felt too dramatic. I had met people worth hating. May wasn't one of them. "Why are you in my room?" I asked. May swallowed. "You looked awake," she said, "and I thought maybe you don't sleep well." She raised the rabbit a little, as if offering a peace treaty. "When I can't sleep, I put him between me and the dark. It helps. I thought maybe it could help you too." I didn't move. My hand still gripped the steel tool under the pillow. May noticed the tension in my shoulders, the angle of my wrist, and her eyes widened. Then her gaze flicked to the bulge under my pillow, and she made a small sound, half surprise, half sadness. "Oh," she breathed. "You have that." I could have lied. Instead, I said, "It's what kept me safe." May's face softened, not with pity, but with something like understanding. "Then I won't touch it," she said quickly. I just didn't want you alone." She climbed onto the far edge of the bed without asking, set the rabbit between us like a neutral country, and lay down stiff as a statue, waiting for my reaction. My body stayed rigid for a full minute. Then, against logic, my grip loosened. The rabbit's fur brushed my hand soft, useless, harmless. It felt ridiculous. It also felt like a door I didn't know existed. By morning, I had slept for 3 hours, which in my world counted as a miracle. May woke first and bolted upright, as if she'd broken a law. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I didn't mean to." "Stop apologizing," I said, voice rough. May blinked. "Okay," she said softly, like she wasn't used to agreements. She glanced at the rabbit, then at my pillow, then back at me. "Do you want me to go with you today?" she asked. "They said they'd take you to school, the academy. It's scary." Her fear was sincere. In that instant, I realized the house had trained May to be grateful for scraps of belonging, and it had trained the adults to maintain balance by never letting anyone feel fully secure. That kind of system breeds quiet cruelty even when no one is shouting. I didn't trust the adults, but I could work with May. "Yes," I said. "You're coming." May's eyes widened like someone had handed her a new script, where she wasn't disposable. Harbor Inn Academy was a polished fortress of uniforms, donor plaques, and students who wore confidence like perfume. I walked through the gates beside May, who clung to her rabbit inside her tote bag as if the school might confiscate it as contraband. Heads turned. Whispers formed. I could almost hear their categories. Scholarship kid, scandal heir, charity project. May's friend group approached like a pack disguised as a bouquet. At the front was a girl with perfect curls and a smile sharp enough to cut fruit. Ivy Wren. She kissed May's cheek and said, "Oh my God, May. You didn't tell us your sister was arriving today." Then Ivy's gaze slid to me. "Saren, right?" she said warmly. "We've heard so much." The warmth didn't reach her eyes. May stiffened. "Ivy," she murmured, hesitant. Ivy laughed. "Don't be nervous," she said. "We're family here." I almost smiled. That word again. Family. Used like a velvet rope to decide who gets inside the club. I met Ivy's gaze and said, "Then you won't mind me telling you a rule from my family. Don't touch what isn't yours." Ivy blinked, surprised. Then she laughed as if I'd made a joke. "Of course," she said. "We adore boundaries." Her friends giggled. May's shoulders tightened. I could feel her hoping I'd play nice, because she had survived by not making waves. I decided to make waves strategically. Within a week, Ivy was everywhere. At lunch tables, in group projects, in May's messages. She performed friendship like an investment. She'd been May's protector before I arrived, which meant she had controlled May's social oxygen while pretending to offer it. I watched the pattern the way I watched exits. Who blocked May from other people, who laughed when May spoke, who praised May in public and criticized her in private. May didn't see it. She kept saying, "Ivy has always been good to me." Good, I learned, was defined here as not openly cruel. In my world, good meant feeding a kid who wasn't yours and teaching her how to survive. Different standards, different traps. At home, Julian tried to make conversation like he was signing a contract. "Do you like the food?" he asked at dinner. "Do you have any allergies?" Elowen hovered, offering extra desserts, extra blankets, extra apologies. May tried to smooth everything, asking me what subjects I liked, what colors I wanted in my room, whether I wanted a bigger desk. The adults kept glancing at May as if they were afraid of how she might break. It was obvious what they wanted. For me to accept the shares, accept the narrative, accept the idea that they were decent people who'd suffered. I didn't buy narratives. I bought evidence. So I began collecting it. Household staff schedules, security camera blind spots, corporate meeting calendars. Not to sabotage yet, but to understand what I'd been brought into. Mara's voice echoed. "Read the fine print twice." The Larkwell's fine print was not in paperwork. It was in habit. The first real test arrived in the form of a gala. Julian announced it at breakfast, as if he were announcing weather. "Next month we host the Glasshouse Initiative launch," he said. "Press, donors, regulators. It's important." His gaze landed on me. "We will formally introduce you." Elowen clasped her hands. "We want the world to know you're home," she said. May's face flickered fear, hope, dread too quick for the adults to notice. Ivy, I learned later, had already secured an invitation through her father's investment firm. Of course she had. "A gala is where predators wear perfume and call it perfume." Julian added, "Saren, we'd like you to sign the share transfer before then. It will reassure stakeholders." There it was, the leash. I swallowed my irritation and said, "I will sign after I review the company's coastal contracts and the incident reports from the year I disappeared." Julian went still. Elowen's smile tightened. Alina Hart coughed softly, a subtle warning. Julian said, "Those records are complicated." "So am I," I replied. May's eyes widened again, a quiet spark of admiration or panic. Both, probably. That afternoon, May took me to the estate's greenhouse, a real greenhouse inside the glass house, full of rare orchids and imported soil. It was the only place in the property that smelled alive. May traced a leaf with her fingertip and whispered, "They keep plants because plants don't judge them." I glanced at her. "Do you judge them?" I asked. May hesitated. I try not to," she said. "If I judge them, I feel like I don't deserve what I've had." That sentence was the trap in full daylight. May believed she owed her existence to their mercy. In truth, they owed her honesty and owed me time. I said gently, "You didn't steal anything. Adults made choices. You were a child. May's lips trembled. Then why do I feel like I'm in the way? She whispered. I thought of my steel tool under my pillow and her rabbit between us. 2 methods of survival. Because they built a house where love is conditional, I said. May stared at an orchid like it might answer. Do you think you can fix it? She asked. I didn't promise. I said. I think I can stop it from crushing you. Ivy made her move a week later. She cornered me after class with a smile so kind it felt like poison. Saren, she said. May has been overwhelmed. You've changed her routine. I raised an eyebrow. Her routine of being managed? Ivy's smile didn't crack. Her routine of stability, she corrected. She's sensitive. People here can be harsh. If she loses friends, she'll suffer. So I'm asking you, sister to sister, to ease off. Ease off. Like May was a territory Ivy claimed and I was trespassing. I could have walked away. Instead, I leaned closer and said softly, if May loses friends because she stops being useful to them, those weren't friends. Ivy's eyes cooled. You think you're tough, she murmured, but you don't understand this world. People here don't fight with fists. They fight with reputation. I smiled. Good, I said. I brought receipts. Ivy blinked. For a second, her mask slipped. Then she laughed and said, You're funny. She walked away with her friends trailing like a shadow. May watched from the end of the hallway, face pale. What did you do? She whispered. I shrugged. I let her know I'm not edible, I said. May swallowed hard. That's brave, she said, as if bravery was a luxury item. I wanted to tell her it was just math. If someone thinks you're prey, you correct their equation early. The sabotage started small. My locker mysteriously misassigned. So my books disappeared. My name misspelled on attendance sheets. Anonymous posts accusing me of blackmailing the Larkwells for money. Each incident was deniable. That's how the wealthy weaponize cruelty. They wrap it in plausible error. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, witnesses. I didn't confront Ivy. Confrontation gives her a stage. I waited for her to commit a mistake big enough to be undeniable. Meanwhile, I trained May. Not in fighting, she hated confrontation, but in noticing. When someone praises you, I said, ask what they want. May frowned. Isn't that cynical? It's safer, I replied. I taught her to keep copies of messages, to say, I need to think, instead of immediate yes. To step away from people who made her feel like she had to earn air. May practiced like a student who had never been allowed to study herself. She began to change. The change was small but visible. Shoulders a little straighter, eyes less apologetic. Ivy noticed. Ivy didn't like losing control. The night before the Academy's midwinter forum, a student showcase attended by donors, May received a message that looked like kindness. Ivy invited her to a private rehearsal to help her calm her nerves. May showed me the message with hopeful eyes. She wants to help, May said. I studied the timing, the location, an empty music wing after hours, and the phrasing. She wants to isolate you, I said. May's face fell. Saren, she whispered. Not everything is a trap. I softened my voice. You're right, I said. But enough things are that we should check. May hesitated. Then she nodded slowly, like someone letting go of a cherished belief. We went anyway, but not alone. I asked Alina Hart for a favor. Access to the Academy's hallway cameras, which the Larkwell Foundation funded. Alina's eyes narrowed. Why? She asked. Because I don't like surprises, I said. Alina looked at me for a long moment, then said, You really are Mara's kid. I didn't ask how she knew. She handed me a temporary access code without swearing secrecy, which I appreciated more than a promise. Promises are cheap. Data is not. The music wing smelled like varnish and old applause. Ivy waited near the practice rooms with 2 girls I didn't recognize older, with the restless energy of people paid to be somewhere. May stepped forward, rabbit bag clutched to her chest. Ivy, she said softly. Ivy smiled. May, sweetheart, she purred. I'm glad you came. Her eyes flicked to me and cooled. Oh, you too. I go where May goes, I said. Ivy's smile tightened. Fine, she said. Let's talk in private. She gestured toward a practice room. I didn't move. No, I said. Talk here. Ivy's jaw twitched. One of the older girls shifted, hands sliding into her jacket pocket. I noted the motion. A weapon or just intimidation? Either way, it confirmed the equation. Ivy sighed theatrically. "You're making this difficult," she said. "All I wanted was for May to stop clinging to you like you're a savior. It's embarrassing." May flinched. Ivy continued, voice syrupy but sharp. "You think Saren cares? She's here for shares. She'll take what she wants and leave you with the mess." May's eyes darted to me, panic rising. Ivy took a step closer to May, lowering her voice. "You know they'll send you away eventually," she whispered. "They always do. Better to choose your side now." That was the cruelty. Using May's fear of abandonment as a leash. My hand itched for the steel tool I always carried in my pocket now, but I kept still. I said, calmly, "Ivy, do you know what makes threats powerful?" Ivy smirked. "Fear," she said. "Evidence," I replied. I lifted my phone, screen glowing. "Smile," I said. "The hallway camera is live, and the audio is recording." Ivy's face whitened for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered, laughing. "You can't use that," she said. "Minors, privacy, foundation policy." "You're right," I said. "So I won't use it in court. I'll use it at the donor forum, where reputation matters." Ivy's eyes flashed with rage. "You think you can play here?" she hissed. One of the older girls lunged toward me. I stepped aside, fast, and she stumbled. May gasped. The hallway camera captured it all. Ivy's mask cracked. "Get her phone," she snapped. That was the moment she crossed from deniable cruelty to documented assault. I didn't need to hit anyone. I just needed to not lose my evidence. I backpedaled, keeping my phone high, and shouted, "Security!" The Academy's guard arrived within 30 seconds, breathless. Ivy's posture snapped into innocence. "Misunderstanding," she said sweetly. "Saren is unstable." May's voice, small but clear, cut through. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," she said. Her hands shook, but she didn't step back. "She told them to take Saren's phone." Ivy stared at May as if May had spoken treason. For the first time, May didn't apologize. The next day at the donor forum, Ivy stood on stage in a pristine blazer and delivered a speech about community care that made the audience coo. Then May's turn came. Her hands trembled as she approached the microphone. I sat in the second row, heart steady. Not because I trusted the room, but because I trusted May's growth. May began her presentation about the Academy's mental wellness initiative. Halfway through, she paused and looked toward the audience. "I want to add something," she said, voice shaky, "about safety." Ivy's smile tightened at the side of the stage. May continued, "Some people use kindness like a cage. They tell you they're protecting you while they're isolating you. They tell you you're weak so you'll be grateful for control." The room quieted. Julian Larkwell, seated among donors, stiffened. Elowen's eyes widened. May took a breath. "Last night," she said, "I was invited to a private rehearsal. It was not for my benefit." She nodded to the tech booth. "Play the hallway clip," she said. The screen behind the stage lit up with grainy footage. Ivy's body language. The older girl lunging. Ivy snapping. "Get her phone." Gasps rippled through the hall like wind through reeds. Ivy's face went blank, then red, then blank again. Her father, a sleek man in the front row, rose halfway, furious. The headmaster stammered. Donors whispered. May's voice grew steadier. "I'm done pretending that cruelty is normal," she said. "If we sponsor a school, we sponsor its integrity too." The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then stronger. Ivy's reputation, built on softness and control, cracked in real time. It didn't fix everything, but it shifted the air, and shifting the air is how you make people able to breathe. Ivy was suspended. Her father threatened lawsuits. The Academy scrambled to review policies. Julian called me into his office that evening. Glass walls reflecting city lights. "This is chaos," he said. "You've turned a simple integration into a spectacle." I folded my arms. "It was already a spectacle," I said. "I just stopped letting you direct it." Julian's gaze hardened. "You're behaving like an adversary," he said. "I'm behaving like someone who doesn't want to be erased again." I replied. Elowen entered halfway through, face tight. "Saren," she pleaded. "Please, we're trying." Trying. Another cheap word. May slipped in behind her, eyes bright with a new kind of courage. Julian's gaze flicked to May. May needs stability, he said sharply. You can't keep dragging her into conflict. May lifted her chin. I dragged myself, she said. Julian froze, as if he'd forgotten May could speak. Elowen's lips trembled. May, she whispered. Honey, don't honey me, May said, voice shaking. If you want me stable, stop treating me like glass. The room went silent. For the first time, the adults had to confront the fact that their careful balance had been hurting both of us. Julian's face tightened. He turned back to me. Sign the share transfer, he said. Then we can move forward. I stared at him. Forward into what? I asked. Into your company continuing to build flood solutions while the coastal neighborhoods drown? Julian's eyes flashed. Our domes protect thousands, he snapped. Your domes displace thousands, I replied. I read the contracts. You buy land cheap after storms, then sell safety back to people who already paid with their homes. Elowen's face went white. That's not true, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Julian's jaw clenched. Where did you get those documents? He demanded. I looked at Alina Hart through the glass wall. She stood in the corridor, arms folded, watching. I stayed silent. I didn't owe him my sources. I owed him accountability. I'll sign, I said finally, if you agree to an independent audit of all displacement clauses, and if the Glasshouse launch includes a public reparations fund for the communities affected by your projects. Julian stared at me like I'd asked him to cut off a limb. You're blackmailing, he said. I smiled without warmth. No, I replied. I'm negotiating. You taught the world that business is just contracts, so let's write a contract that includes consequences. The Glasshouse Initiative launch arrived anyway, because corporations don't pause for family drama. The estate filled with journalists, donors, and politicians who loved the word resilience because it made them feel brave without getting wet. May wore a simple dress and held her rabbit in her purse like a secret. I wore a black suit borrowed from Mara's closet years ago, too sharp for a teenager, too honest for a gala. Mara didn't attend. She sent one text. Keep your spine. Julian took the stage beneath a dome of glass and lights and began his speech. We are honored, he said, to welcome Saren Larkwell home, and to announce that our family is united in our mission to protect this city. Cameras flashed. Elowen's smile trembled. May stood beside me, jaw set. Julian gestured toward me. Saren, he said, would you like to say a few words? He expected gratitude. He expected a fairy tale. He expected me to behave like a symbol. I stepped to the microphone and said, I'd like to read a clause. The room rippled with confusion. Julian's eyes widened. Alina Hart went still. May's hand tightened around mine. I continued. Larkwell Domes has signed agreements with multiple districts promising flood protection. In those agreements are displacement clauses that allow the company to purchase land at post-disaster valuation and restrict residents from returning. These clauses have removed families from their neighborhoods under the guise of safety. Gasps, whispers. Julian's face tightened like a storm front. Elowen swayed. I held up a printed page. This is not rumor, I said. This is your contract language. I looked directly at Julian. Before I sign any shares, I want this company to sign something else. An independent audit and a reparations fund that is controlled by community representatives, not by PR. Julian stepped toward the mic, voice low. Saren, he hissed. This is not the place. I smiled. It's exactly the place, I said. You built a dome to show the world transparency, so let's be transparent. In the front row, a councilwoman's eyes sharpened. Journalists lifted phones. Donors whispered, calculating risk. Julian's face was trapped between rage and strategy. He leaned into the microphone and said, carefully, we are committed to continuous improvement. We will review these concerns. It was the corporate equivalent of an apology, vague, reversible, designed to float. The crowd murmured, dissatisfied. Then May did something I didn't expect. She stepped to the second microphone and said, voice clear, I will donate my personal trust allocation to the reparations fund as well. The room fell quiet. Elowen gasped. Julian stared at May as if she'd stabbed him. May continued, hands trembling but steady in purpose. I've lived under this roof, she said. I benefited from it. If our safety required other people's displacement, then our safety is a debt. I don't want to live on debt. The words hung in the air like a bell. People began to clap slow at first, then louder, because donors love virtue when it doesn't cost them too much, and May had just made virtue expensive. Julian's jaw set. He couldn't contradict May without looking like a monster. He couldn't agree without losing profit. So he did what powerful men do when cornered by optics. He conceded publicly and planned to renegotiate privately later. "We will establish the fund," he said. "We will open our contracts for audit." The cameras captured his smile. I captured his eyes, which promised retaliation. Fine. Retaliation is easier to handle when it's expected. After the launch, the backlash came like a tide. Shareholder meetings, angry calls, anonymous threats. The board accused Julian of emotional decision-making. Julian blamed me. Elowen cried in hallways. May became a headline. The soft heiress who spoke up. Ivy's father released a statement calling me a destabilizing influence and hinting that my background was questionable. People online debated whether I was a hero or a grifter. I didn't care. While they argued, the audit began. And audits have a hungry appetite. It found more than clauses. It found kickbacks, collusion with developers, and a pattern of targeting neighborhoods least able to resist. The councilwoman opened an investigation. Regulators sniffed around Julian's doorstep like dogs smelling rot. Puddle, if I'd had one, would have barked. Instead, I had Mara's lessons, and a stubborn calm that came from surviving worse than gossip. Julian tried to isolate me the way Ivy tried to isolate May. He restricted my access to internal systems, reassigned staff, hinted that May would be sent to a sister campus for her mental health. That last threat made my blood go cold. May learned about it from a staff member's careless remark and came to my room shaking. "They're going to send me away," she whispered. I sat her on the bed, rabbit between us, and said, "No, they're going to try." May's eyes filled. "It's my fault," she whispered automatically. I grabbed her hands. "Stop," I said. "Their discomfort is not your fault." May swallowed, breathing hard. "What do we do?" she asked. I thought of Mara's dog tag. Return. Return to what? To a house that used people like props? Or to the idea that you can redefine what home means? "We document," I said. "We organize. We find allies." May nodded slowly. "Like you did with Ivy," she said. I smiled faintly. "Exactly," I said. "Only Julian has better lawyers." Alina Hart became our first unexpected ally. She invited me and May to her office downtown, away from the estate's cameras. "I drafted the original guardianship papers," she admitted, voice quiet. "I didn't know the child they listed as deceased was alive." My throat tightened. "They listed me as deceased?" I asked. Alina looked ashamed. "It made succession clean," she said. "I told myself it was administrative. I was wrong." May's fingers curled around her rabbit strap. "So they lied," May whispered. Alina nodded. "Yes," she said. "And there are people in that company who will do anything to keep the lie from turning into charges." She slid a folder across the desk. "This is evidence of who authorized the deceased designation and who benefited." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Names, signatures, dates. Julian's, yes, but also Elowen's. Elowen had signed. My mother. The tears at the atrium were not just guilt. They were fear of exposure. May's face went pale. "Elowen," she whispered. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to hate anyone, but I understood now why Mara warned me about fairy tales. Fairy tales paint mothers as saints. Real life writes mothers as humans with incentives. I looked up at Alina. "Why are you giving this to us?" I asked. Alina exhaled. "Because I'm tired," she said. "And because you're the first Larkwell who has asked what the company owes instead of what it can offer." She hesitated. "Also because May reminds me of someone I failed to protect once." Her gaze flicked to May's rabbit. "Soft things deserve safety too. We use the evidence like a lever. Not by threatening Elowen publicly. May begged me not to, but by forcing Julian into a corner where he couldn't move May without triggering a legal storm. Alina filed an injunction request tied to May's guardianship status, arguing that May's relocation would constitute retaliation against a whistleblower-adjacent witness. The wording was brutal and brilliant. The board panicked. Julian raged. Elowen collapsed into sobs in the greenhouse, orchids trembling like they were listening. I found her there one evening. Alone, fingers pressed to her mouth, eyes red. She looked smaller without her pearls. "I'm sorry," she whispered as soon as she saw me. The word tasted like dust. Sorry doesn't change that you signed my death, I said, voice steady. Elowen flinched as if struck. I didn't know what else to do, she cried. They told me you were gone. They told me it was mercy. Mercy. That's what people call violence when they're too cowardly to name it. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said, if you want to repair anything, start by telling the truth on record. Not to me, to investigators. Elowen shook. Julian will destroy me, she whispered. He already did, May said from the doorway. I hadn't noticed May follow me. Elowen turned, eyes wide. May's voice trembled but held. You let me live in a lie, May said. You let Saren be erased. You didn't protect either of us. If you want to be my mother, stop choosing comfort. The greenhouse was silent except for Elowen's shaky breathing. Then slowly, Elowen nodded. It wasn't redemption. It was a beginning. The board meeting that followed felt like war dressed in suits. Julian sat at the head of the table, face carved from control. I sat opposite with Alina beside me, and May a seat away, rabbit hidden in her bag like a secret weapon of softness. The board members spoke in euphemisms. Risk, exposure, brand stability. Julian proposed a motion. To place my shares in a protective trust, controlled by the board until I proved maturity. Translation: strip me of power. I let him finish. Then I slid Alina's folder onto the table. Before we vote, I said, I want to address a misrepresentation in the company's historical records. Julian's eyes narrowed. What misrepresentation? He asked, voice smooth. I looked at each board member and said, the company filed a death designation for Saren Larkwell in order to stabilize succession and keep investment streams intact. That designation was signed by Julian Larkwell and Elowen Larkwell? Gasps. Murmurs. Julian's expression tightened. That's absurd, he said. You have no proof. Alina spoke then, calm as a scalpel. We do, she said, and distributed copies. The room shifted. Board members paled. Someone muttered the word fraud. Julian's knuckles whitened. This is extortion, he snapped. No, I said quietly. It's disclosure. The audit already put you under scrutiny. This turned scrutiny into indictment. Julian's gaze flicked to Elowen, who sat at the far end, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the table. For the first time, she didn't look away. Julian understood then that his quiet shield his wife's silence was cracking. He leaned back, breathing hard through his nose like an animal forced to choose between flight and bite. What do you want? He asked, voice low. I answered, I want the board to vote for an independent compliance officer with authority over displacement contracts. I want May protected in this house by legal guardianship, not by your moods. And I want you to resign as CEO. The word resign hit the room like a dropped glass. Julian laughed, sharp and humorless. You think you can take my company? He said. It's already yours. I replied. That's what you offered to calm stakeholders. Remember? 51%. He stared at me, rage shaking his control. And then he did something that proved he still underestimated me. He swore, aloud, I will never leave this company. The word never is a trap when you're about to lose a vote. Minutes later, the board voted. Not out of morality, out of fear. Julian lost by 2 votes. He rose from the table, face red, and for a second I thought he might throw a chair. Instead, he smoothed his tie, smiled for the cameras in the hallway, and walked out like a man who believed he would return through some other door. Mara's voice echoed. Predators clean their teeth. Julian would try again, but now the company had a record, and records are harder to bury than daughters. In the months that followed, Harbor and City didn't become a utopia. The domes still stood, the bay still rose, lawsuits still crawled through courts. But the reparations fund began distributing money to displaced families with community oversight. Contracts were rewritten. The compliance officer refused to rubber stamp developer bids. May started volunteering at a coastal clinic, no longer hiding behind softness. She still kept her rabbit, but now it looked less like a crutch and more like a reminder that gentleness can survive without surrendering. Elowen testified in the investigation, voice shaking, telling the truth about the deceased record. People online called her brave. I didn't. I called it late. Still, late truth is heavier than none. Julian tried to smear me, of course. He hired consultants to paint Mara as a criminal, and me as unstable. Mara responded by sending me a single photo. her standing in front of our old apartment, arms crossed, expression bored. Underneath she wrote, "Let them try." That was the closest thing to comfort she ever offered. And it was enough. The most dangerous part of winning against people like Julian is that they don't always fight you directly. Sometimes they aim for the softest thing you care about and call it coincidence. 2 weeks after the board vote, May didn't come home from the clinic on time. Her phone went to voicemail. The estate's security chief claimed a traffic delay, but the cameras at the gate showed her car never returned. Elowen started to hyperventilate. Staff ran in circles. Julian, though officially removed, sent a text to the compliance officer. "If anyone panics, that's on you." It was a line meant to stain us with blame. I didn't panic. I opened the estate's logistics dashboard. Alina had helped me install new, transparent, audited, and traced May's last vehicle ping to a warehouse district near the docks. The location matched none of her routes. I grabbed my jacket and the steel tool and told Alina, "Call the police, but don't let them handle it quietly. Quiet is how people disappear." At the warehouse, I found May's clinic tote bag on the ground, rabbit strap torn. That alone would have made May cry. Seeing it there made my vision sharpen. A van idled nearby with tinted windows. 2 men stepped out, pretending to smoke. They wore cheap shoes and expensive watches, which meant someone else paid for the risk. I walked straight toward them. One lifted his chin. "Wrong street," he said. I let a small smile show. "I'm not lost," I replied. Then I raised my phone and said, "Smile. You're on a live stream." The men froze. They hadn't expected visibility. The van's door slid open, and May stumbled out, wrists not bound but clearly shaken, eyes wide. Her hair was disheveled, and she clutched her rabbit to her chest as if it had been returned as a joke. The driver hissed, "Get back in." But May didn't. She ran toward me, and I stepped between her and the men. I didn't strike. I didn't need to. I simply spoke loudly, naming license plates, describing faces, reciting details the way Mara taught me to. Make yourself a witness they can't easily silence. Sirens arrived. Alina had been fast, or the city had finally learned that scandals make police move. The men fled on foot. The van sped away, but cameras at the intersection caught it. May was safe, shaking in my arms, and I realized that Julian's last weapon was the oldest one, fear disguised as random violence. At the station, May insisted on giving a statement, even though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. An officer offered her water and spoke to her like she was fragile glass. May inhaled, looked at the officer, and said, "Please don't talk to me like I'll shatter. I need you to write down what I say." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. She described the van, the route, the moment the driver told her, "Your sister thinks she owns the company now." That sentence tied the threat to motive. It turned the incident from a street crime into corporate retaliation. The officer's expression sharpened. Alina leaned in and asked for the report number. I watched May speak and felt something like pride, sharp and surprising. Softness, I realized, is not the absence of steel. It is the decision to keep tenderness alive even after people try to use it against you. The next morning, Julian's spokesperson released a statement expressing concern for May's mental wellness and suggesting she had misinterpreted a routine rideshare mishap. The phrase rideshare mishap made me laugh once, harshly, because it was so insulting it almost circled into comedy. The compliance officer issued a rebuttal with time-stamped vehicle telemetry and the police report attached. Shareholders, already skittish, demanded answers. Regulators who had been politely waiting now leaned forward. Julian's allies began to vanish like rats sensing floodwater. Ivy's father tried to distance himself too, claiming he had never condoned harassment. I sent him Ivy's hallway clip again, with a short note. Condone is a choice. Accountability is a fact. He didn't reply. May and I went back to the academy a week later for a restorative justice panel. The headmaster insisted on hosting to heal the community. Ivy attended via video link from her family's penthouse, cheeks pale, eyes bright with practiced tears. "I never meant harm," she said. "I felt threatened. I made mistakes." The room murmured sympathetically. Wealth teaches people to confuse remorse with performance. May raised her hand. When the moderator called on her, May stood and said, "If you're sorry, stop centering your feelings." Ivy's eyes widened. May continued, voice calm. "You didn't make mistakes. You made plans. You used my fear to keep me small. You tried to have Saren assaulted, and when you were caught, you used softness to avoid consequence. I'm not accepting that anymore. The room went quiet. Ivy's tears faltered. For the first time, her mask didn't work, because May wasn't playing the old role. The headmaster swallowed hard and said, "Thank you, May." It sounded like a prayer for the situation to end, but it didn't end there. Other students began speaking about whispered bullying, about donor kids who used influence like fists. The panel became messy, uncomfortable, real. Watching it, I understood that we hadn't just challenged a family. We had cracked a school's culture, and cracks let light in whether people like it or not. That winter, when the first major storm hit after the audit reforms, the Bay surged into the lower districts again. The domes protected the neighborhoods they covered, but now the company was required to deploy mobile barriers and emergency housing to the districts it had previously treated as expendable. The work was chaotic and unglamorous. Sandbags, generators, blankets. May and I volunteered at the staging site, handing out supplies until our hands ached. Reporters showed up expecting a photo of the Heiress sisters doing charity. I told them, "This isn't charity. This is service owed." A woman with mud on her cheeks looked at me and said, "If you keep talking like that, maybe they'll finally listen." I didn't promise miracles. I just nodded and kept working. At dawn, the water receded, leaving debris and exhaustion and the faint smell of algae. People were still angry rightfully, but for the first time, the anger had a channel. Complaints turned into documented claims, claims into payments, payments into rebuilding. It was slow. It was imperfect. It was real. On my 18th birthday, I returned to the pawn shop alone. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. It never does, because change costs money and money goes elsewhere. Mara was on the roof, smoking, watching the street like she always did. I climbed the stairs and handed her a new dog tag I'd had engraved. On one side, return. On the other, repair. Mara stared at it, then snorted. "You're getting sentimental," she said. "I'm getting strategic," I replied. She studied me, eyes sharp. "Did they break you?" she asked. I thought of glass halls, velvet scripts, and May's voice on stage saying she was done pretending. I shook my head. "They tried," I said. Mara nodded, satisfied. "Good," she said, "because now you know something most rich kids never learn." "What?" I asked. Mara flicked ash into the wind and said, "Home isn't where they return you. Home is what you refuse to let them destroy." I looked out at the bay beyond the rooftops, sunlight on water like shattered glass. In my pocket, the steel tool pressed against my palm, still cold, still reliable. In my other pocket, May had slipped a small piece of her rabbit's fur just a tuft into an envelope with a note. "For when the dark feels loud." I held both, metal and softness, and realized I no longer had to choose one way to survive. I could be sharp and kind. I could keep exits and still build doors, and if anyone ever tried to erase another child with paperwork again, I'd be there with a ledger, a microphone, and the stubborn belief that repair isn't charity. It's debt repayment,